Training is crucial for performance, improvement, and consistency. It's also one of the most expensive investments we're ever going to make. Getting it right can make a massive positive impact on our business. When we don't see meaningful results from training, it can cause tremendous frustration. In this 6-part series, of which this is part 5, I'm sharing the guidelines for training I've established for myself after many years of learning what works and what doesn't.
Running a service business can be hard. It is not unusual for business owners in industries like contracting, home repair, auto repair, business-to-business services like janitorial, IT and accounting, and many others to feel overwhelmed by all the priorities facing them at any given time. Between addressing the needs of the customers, managing the employees, figuring out the financials, and getting processes in place, feeling like you're making significant progress on your business journey can be difficult. Welcome to Service Industry Success, hosted by Brian Harding. Each week, Brian will look at real-world strategies for building the business you are dreaming of, while also sharing tactics to get through some of the most frustrating parts of business ownership with a lot more ease. Let's get started.
I look at training like an investment. I put in time, money, and energy now, anticipating a greater return of time, energy, and money later on. But not all investments are the same. An investment made in 1990 in a Walmart stock would have resulted in considerably different returns than Radio Shack. Just investing the time, energy, and money alone for training and education for our teams does not guarantee we're going to see a return. We also need to have effective training systems, processes, and strategies. This is part 5 of a 6-part series in which I'm covering the guidelines I've developed for myself when I'm doing training and education with my team. It's not necessarily an all-inclusive list, but it is fairly comprehensive. If you haven't listened to previous episodes in this series, I would definitely recommend starting from the beginning with episode 179. Okay, next one we're going to cover is it's better to train one thing well than 5 things poorly. This is a direct result of a couple things. One, just my experience, and again, as an employee, as a manager, as a business owner, I know the pattern that we fall into. We have an hour meeting scheduled, whether it's weekly, monthly, twice a month, whatever the cadence is. We have an hour set aside or an hour and a half, whatever the time frame is. And we think, okay, I'm going to cover these handful of things. And then somebody comes up to you and you're like, hey, make sure you cover this in the meeting. Somebody else comes to you, hey, make sure you cover this in the meeting. And then we have the customer complaint an hour before the meeting. And like pretty soon we have 13 things to cover in an hour. And so our solution is, again, I'm laughing because I've done this so many times. It's funny at this point, but it's not funny when you look at my effective rate, my efficacy rate of doing this strategy. But it's funny now. We're going to cover 13 things in an hour. Okay, well, what's the math on that? 13 things in an hour. That means each thing gets 4 minutes or 4.5 minutes or whatever it is. And the idea, of course, is that everyone's going to just like snap to and like retain 100% of this. Be like, yeah, okay, well, awesome. Like I just got better at 13 things. That's what our brain tells us, which, obviously sitting here in this moment, we can go, yeah, that's probably not the way it is. But here's some actual data about things that I think are helpful. There was a study done a few years ago about TEDx talks. And now these were strictly 10 minutes, one topic. So this is not covering 13 things. This is covering one thing for only 10 minutes. And they studied the retention rate of the material covered in a 10-minute TEDx talk. So immediately following the 10-minute one topic TEDx talk, retention of the material fell 50%. Immediately afterwards, only 50% of the material was retained by the audience. The next morning, that fell to 25%. So less than 24 hours later, the audience remembered less than 25% of one 10-minute TED Talk. And a week later, they retained less than 10%. Now, this is just the math. Again, this is not my opinion. This is not anecdotal stuff. Some of the stuff I've been covering, like in my experience, anecdotally. Here's how it's worked for me. This is not. This is an actual study that was done. I don't remember who did the study, but this is a legitimate study that was done, just strictly covering people's retention ability. And so it's only going to get worse. This part is anecdotal. If we take one 10-minute TED Talk and a week later the retention is 10%, well, if we did 5 10-minute TED Talks, each of a different topic, do we think a week later each topic would have more or less than 10% retention? In my opinion, it would be considerably less. We have one 50-minute meeting covering 5 topics for 10 minutes. Each of those topics would probably have less than 10% retention if one topic for 10 minutes has about a 10% retention rate. All right. So again, goes back to, it feels efficient to just like cram a bunch of stuff into a meeting and like just get through it. Like, but here's the output I'm looking for. My goal is not to communicate things. My goal is to get comprehension, buy-in, engagement, participation, willing participation. I'm not going through this exercise of training and education for the purpose of communicating things. I'm going through this process for the purpose of transferring knowledge. I think that was a key thing for me, is when I stopped talking about, and looking back in time, and when I didn't do this very well. I worked for a company where I was the general manager when I had 60 something employees, and I was only allowed to have one meeting a month. This was not my choice. Like, the company rules were you had one meeting a month. Well, over the course of a month, a lot of things had to be covered in our one meeting, and they were generally, hour and a half, 2 hour meetings. And I would find that I just had so many things to cover. And this is kind of where I learned this, was it just like the idea of having one meeting a month for 2 hours and covering, literally in my case, probably conservatively 10, 12 topics. And then just like walking away from that meeting going, okay, really, what is this doing? What do I really expect to happen here as I'm getting back to my office or whatever? What do I really expect to happen here? Like, do I really expect them to get this and like this to move the needle? And it just began to feel like me, like, no, that's not going to make a lot of sense. So, consistency over a long period of time is what I think matters. Again, the rule I have is I would rather train one thing well than 5 things poorly. Now, that doesn't mean I don't cover 5 things in a meeting, but it does mean that I can't cram, 15 plus things into a meeting, which we oftentimes do, or even 9 things plus into a meeting, and hit it one time and like have an expectation like, okay, check the box on that one, we're moving on. That's not how this works. I can train multiple things simultaneously, but I need to train them well. And so we began to develop a training structure. We just kind of covered 4 or 5 kinds of topics in meetings, and they were all like integrated. They were all related to each other. Communication led to the customer experience, and accident prevention we've covered. And obviously, accident prevention was a main thing in our company, as is for many companies that are blue collar. White collar versions more like data protection and geez, I can't think of the word. Identity protection, that kind of stuff. Confidentiality, that's the word I was looking for. Those are bigger risks than like white collar versions, but blue collar versions is accident prevention. Well, you might cover a different topic on accident prevention, but accident prevention is the thing that we're drilling home. That's the one thing we're training well, is we take this seriously here, and we're doing this stuff. I'm not saying you can only teach dehydration for 6 weeks to be quote unquote training one thing well. That's not what I'm suggesting. It's just a reminder for me that rather than trying to cram a bunch of stuff in and fit a bunch of things into a small period of time, over the long haul, it's better to have a overarching strategy of the information they need to know, and have it all make sense and have it all tie together, and do it well, do it consistently. Again, I look at efficiency as how much are they retaining and applying this knowledge over many months or even years. What is the improvement we're seeing? What is the difference in customer complaints or warranty work, or efficiency in different different areas? Bottom line profit. Like, there's all kinds of things to look at as far as like what's going well, but a huge part of that is, what can they tell me that they understand? And like in a marketing sense, I think there's if you're selling Clorox bleach to somebody who's never heard of Clorox or bleach before, it takes something like 7 or 12 times for them to hear the name Clorox bleach and see the commercial before they're even aware that they've seen this before. Not that they're going to buy the thing, that they're even aware that they've seen this before. And that's not a marketing thing, that's a human brain thing. We have to just be aware. It takes reps, it takes a consistent like through line and consistency of information being delivered for people to become aware of stuff. And this is the kind of thing, like, I can't expect to teach the customer experience journey to a team of 20 people in an hour and just like walk away and okay, they got that. Like, that's not how that works. That I will have to break that down into components and train that one thing over the course of weeks or months for them to really, really get it. And so that's what I'm talking about here. It doesn't mean we can't talk about 5 things in a meeting. It doesn't mean that at all. We all went to high school and junior high, and many of us went to college. Not me, but many of you went to college, and you took social studies and science and English and math and computer science or whatever. And you had like 5 or 6 classes, and you learned 5 or 6 things simultaneously throughout the year. Like, that's all fine. I'm not saying we can't do that. I'm saying if I have 10 minutes, I would rather train one thing well than 5 things poorly. I hope that makes sense. All right, next one. I always need to speak about what I want or need through the context of what's in it for them to do this thing. Now, this is a moving target. In the last few years, it's 2024 as I'm recording this. Last few years, unemployment's been just south of 4% for quite a while. In that environment, I have to do a lot more of this, worrying about what's in and speaking through the context of what's in it for them, than I did in 2009 when unemployment was 12% or 10%, whatever it was. Unemployment's a factor here. People's fear of not having a job is definitely a factor in how much I need to worry about addressing things and teaching things and presenting things and educating them through the context and the lens of what's in it for them to do this thing. Now, I want to be clear about one thing here. I'm not suggesting we don't have deal breakers. Of course we do. None of these things I'm talking about are absolutes, right? I know we're going to have deal breakers. I'm not saying that I have to get them on board with, following our safety protocol. I'm not saying that on every single thing, but I am saying if I'm not getting the improvement or buy-in I need, when I need to in the time frame I want, I can move the needle on that very quickly when I can get them to verbalize what's in it for them, not the company, not the customer. Let me repeat this. I can move the needle really quickly when I can get them, the employee, to verbalize what's in it for them, the employee, to do a thing. I can move the needle really quickly when I can get them to say out loud, I do this thing and I get this out of it, versus I know that's what the customer needs. I know that's what the company needs. If I don't have willing participation, engagement, buy-in, all that stuff that I want, commitment, all those things, I can move the needle immediately on that when I can get them to connect the dots on what's in it for them to do that. Now, there's different approaches with this, and we're not going to have time to go through this whole exercise here in this short podcast episode. But collectively as a group, I've talked about before, like, I need to know, generally speaking, for this group, like, what's in it for them to do stuff at all. For my guys, they like to be the hero. Other employees like to be the advocate. Other employees like to be the authority. Others like to be, um, you know, different characters, avatars, right? Collectively, I need to know what makes my people go. And it's really beneficial if I can know from my direct reports what individually makes them go. Now, so if I have a leadership team of 6 or 8, if I can know what makes each one of them go, and they know what makes their team of 6 or 8 go, we have all the bases covered. I don't need to know what employee number 42, what makes him go. That's not how this works. I don't have the capacity to have that kind of reach. I need to know what makes my leadership team go, and I need to teach them how to figure out what makes their teams go individually. So, for example, for people who want to be in leadership roles someday, this is really easy. Like, if you want to be in a leadership role, what are the kinds of things you think you need to be good at to do that? And probably whatever this thing is I want them to do. I've used the example before of a guy who was absolutely great technically, was a little rough around the edges with working with coworkers and customers and things like that. wanted to be a leader. I asked him, what do you think you have to do to be a good leader? He said, I probably need to learn how to work with people better. What do you know? That was 100% right. And so what he identified was the improvement that needed to happen and what was in it for him to do that. Well, that made my life tremendously easier, right? Same thing for my guys. Once I learned that they wanted to be the hero, I talked about communication. When I got them to verbalize, it's not how well I fix the widget that makes me the hero. It's how well I communicate that I fix the widget that makes me the hero. What do you know? All of a sudden, communication became a really important thing to them, which means I didn't have to worry about it because they were willingly doing the thing. This was a game changer for me. Now, again, I know that in 1932, during the Great Depression, we didn't have to worry about this kind of thing. I get that. People knew top of mind, if they didn't do a job at work, they would lose their job. Their families wouldn't eat, wouldn't have a place to live, wouldn't have shoes. We didn't have to worry about that kind of stuff. I get that. In 2023, 2022 especially, we did have to worry about this. And so this is a moving target based on a lot of different criteria. I'm just saying the more deal breakers aside, again, I'm not talking deal breakers here. The more I need improvement on whatever this thing is that's causing me anxiety and frustration and whatever, the more I need improvement, the fastest way I've learned to get that improvement is by them connecting the dots on what's in it for them to do this, whether it's individually, like the guy who wants to be the manager, the boss. I want to make more money, so I need to learn new skills. I want to get promoted. I want to buy 20 acres in Montana, so I want to make a lot of money so I can do that. Well, whatever it is, whatever they want. It doesn't matter what they want. I just need to have them connect the dots on, I do this thing well and I get this outcome I want. I want to be respected by my peers. I want to be respected by my customer, like whatever it is. If I'm having those kinds of frustrations and I'm not getting the movement I need and the improvement I need, the biggest lever I can pull is them identifying top of mind what's in it for them to do this. So I know that's a hard one for a lot of us. Again, it'd be easier if this wasn't required, or if this was, it's not a requirement. It'd be easier if this wasn't the lever. It would be easier if they would just do it. I get that part, but for me, I have found that the more I speak about what's in it for them, the more they get on board, and that's been 100% true, even when unemployment was 12%. Even when unemployment was 10% and there was plenty of people to hire, it was still cheaper for me to train the people I had than go out and hire somebody new. And so even then, I learned that if I want them to do a thing without me having to babysit it and they want willing participation, the fastest way is for them to know what's in it for them to do that. So it's been a huge, huge game changer for me. Again, I can give, I don't want, I always give the same examples here because communication is a thing that many of us wish our teams were better at. Accident prevention is a big thing for lots of companies, so I tend to use the same examples. But numerous things I can tell you that once they figured out what was in it for them, man, did we get a lot of improvement. So anyhow, I hope that helps. As usual, if you find the information I share helpful, please share this podcast with a friend or colleague who you think could benefit from it. Of course, public sharing is also appreciated. I know training is a hot topic for a lot of folks. Especially coming in the economic cycle, in the macroeconomic situation we're coming into. Companies that have well-trained individuals are going to do well or better, and companies that do not have well-trained employees are going to suffer a little worse, I think. So this is definitely something that if you have a friend who's a business owner or a business leader who has verbalized, man, I really wish my people would get some of this stuff. These are fantastic episodes to share, and I hope you do. So that's it for this week, and I'll talk to you all next week.